Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 283 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Mason's mama. And we go by Mason's mama because Mason's mama, Lindsay, is on TikTok, and she's going to talk to you all about that and how you can follow her on TikTok. But I know that you are just going to love hearing from her. I also wanted to mention the fact that as we record this, Mason's birthday is actually the day after this recording, and the anniversary of his death date is just a few days after that. So you can keep that in mind, that the dates worked out again. I've been talking so much about this in the last few months, how it seems like it feels random, but not random, right? It feels like it's preordained somehow that moms and dads come on with right around dates that are significant. And Lindsay really felt very strongly that this was the right time to be able to talk about Mason. And even though she's having an incredibly challenging, hard week today, inexplicably, she felt a little stronger and ready to tell her story. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that is another cool thing about how this is just working out with all of these dates. And just invite all of you, if you feel like you want to share on the podcast, you feel free to email me, Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, at andysmom.com. We also do appreciate any donations you might like to give. That would be through the website as well, or that's through GiveButter, it's our website, or you can give via Venmo payment as well. Everything is tax deductible. You get a receipt for that, certainly. I'm certain this week's videos are going to be really great on Instagram because obviously Lindsay does TikTok, so she's got a lot of fun pictures and videos that she's going to be able to give to Jen to put into our Instagram clips for the week. So go on Instagram and Facebook and follow us there. Right now, though, just sit back and listen to Lindsay, Mason's mama. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am too. I'm excited to hear all about Mason. So, if for any of you, those may know about Lindsay because you are on TikTok, right?
Yes, I am.
What are you on TikTok?
Okay, my name on TikTok is Lindsay with a little red heart and then Mason's mom.
Uh-huh.
That's where they can find me. I have a page dedicated to my son. I post pretty regularly on there, all kinds of content regarding Mason. So anyone wants to follow me.
Well, and that's why I'm extra excited to talk to you today because you emailed me. You emailed me that information, and I have to say, I'm not a young person. I'm now in my 50s. I'm not like a big person on TikTok. I don't even really get TikTok, but I got onto TikTok and saw the videos that Lindsay did and the cute little videos that you have of Mason running around and smiling. And you just captured me right away.
Oh, that's great.
It was like I watched probably half a dozen videos. I laughed, I cried, I did everything in the middle. And then I immediately wrote you back because I really knew that I wanted to have you on to be able to talk more about Mason.
Well, I'm glad you did. Like I said, I'm really happy to be here. I'm glad you liked our videos. I put a lot of heart into those when I make them. I post a lot when I'm feeling the waves of grief and feeling like I need to share my boy. I want the world to see him because he was so special and important to me. And so TikTok has just been a great outlet for me to share my son.
Well, and you can tell that you put your heart into it because, like I said, I felt something. Every single one that I watched, I could feel it. I mean, I could feel kind of the emotion that you were kind of putting out at the time, because some of those are those reminders and just seeing pure joy on Mason. And
Yes.
others are just the heart-wrenching grief that you're going through. So you
Yes.
did a beautiful job there, and I have every reason to believe you'll do a beautiful job here. So
Yeah.
so why don't you start out by just telling us all about your Mason?
All right. Well, starting out, let's go back here. I married my high school sweetheart, and we had our daughter when I was 20. And we kind of decided we didn't want to have any more children, which I don't really know why, because she was just this perfect, great baby. But we were happy with one child.
Uh-huh.
We stuck to that for 12 years. And then
Oh, really? Wow.
along came a surprise. I found out I was pregnant, and I'd kind of assumed I was going to have another little girl. And I found out it was a boy, and I was like, what am I going to do with a son? I've only been a girl mom for 12 years. So I had Mason January 16th of 2021. It was right after the whole height of COVID. He was
Yeah.
just the sweetest, most beautiful boy. He was always happy, smiley. People called him Smiley. I guess they used to call my husband that when he was a baby too, because he was just always grinning. And Mason was always happy, good boy. And as he got older, he had blonde curly hair and blue eyes. He was absolutely beautiful. He was really into cars and trucks as he got older. That was his thing. You know, all little boys have something they're really into. He had a huge collection of cars and trucks. He always had one in his hand wherever we go. He liked Disney movies and dancing, and my daughter would play the guitar, and Mason would dance for her when she was playing. It was really sweet. So he was just best little boy anyone could ask for. He was super laid back. I had like a very, very strong bond with Mason. I had kind of heard about like boy moms being a little bit crazy sometimes or over the top, and I didn't really understand that until I had my son. And he just like, I just was in awe of him. He was just so beautiful and sweet and special. He was mom's boy. He was with me at all time. I'm a social worker and worked from home. So he was there with me like at all times. When I was working from home, I was really blessed to be able to have him there with me. We just had a really strong bond, and I can't even really describe it. He was super, super happy, sweet baby, you know. Couldn't have asked for anything better.
Yeah, and you were at such a different point in your life too. When you think about like
Oh, yeah.
having a baby at 20 and then having a baby at 32.
It's totally different. When you have a baby at 20, it's like you're figuring out life together,
Yes.
going through the highs and lows and just trying to grow up yourself and raise this
Right.
baby. And my daughter was a really easy baby too, and really happy, and she was great. But having a baby at 32, I feel like I really, really valued that one-on-one time, like rocking him to sleep and the cuddles, and it was a totally different experience than having a
Hmm.
baby at 20. You're absolutely right. I feel like I really valued that time and not enjoyed it more, because of course I enjoyed my time with my daughter too, but it's very different.
It is very different, and I think you are at a different place. In some ways, it is kind of a sweet spot in life. I think to be, because the young moms, it can be hard because, like you said, you're still growing up yourself. You're still, so in some ways you're growing up together, which can be very cool, but still it's a lot. And then the first time moms that don't have kids until they're in their 40s, honestly, that is such a super challenge if that's kind of, especially when that's your first kid, because
Yeah.
first of all, your body can't handle it quite as much, and then secondly, you've been like an adult living an adult life for 20
Exactly.
years, and now to have, you don't, that flexibility that you need is difficult. But this is kind of it's a spot where you really kind of are in the middle and still able to really kind of flex and move, but feeling confident enough in your own skin and where you are as a parent that it can be a little bit easier in some ways too, I feel
It
like.
was great. I loved it. I remember telling my husband, like, what are we going to do? We have a preteen and we're starting over, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. And when I had him, I was just in absolute bliss, and I just absolutely loved being mom to a little one again. And I was like, why did I not have more after our daughter? Like, I couldn't wrap my head around why I never did it again, because I loved it so much. And it was just like a whole new experience starting over. And It's
Yeah.
like, why did I wait so long to have another one? I could have 4 more now if I wasn't in my 30s, but
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, do you want to talk a little bit now about kind of what happened with Mason?
yeah, and I could talk probably too much in detail about this. So if I start kind of going on too long about this,
Okay.
if you need to cut me off, you can. I know some people may not want to hear a lot of details like that, but Mason's story kind of started in December of 22. He was almost 2 years old. That was the month before his 2-year birthday. He had a fever and was starting to get sick. So I was like this super overprotective mom because, like, remember I said he was born during COVID. And so I was constantly, since the day he was born, terrified of him getting sick. That was like a huge fear of mine. And we
Yeah.
isolated a lot in the beginning. And
I mean, you and lots of families, honestly, right? I'm a pediatrician. I saw it, right? Yeah.
so I was just constantly worried about him getting sick. So I may have overreacted a little bit. We went up to the ER just with a basic fever. Okay. He was breathing fast, and I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't have RSV. It's December. So we went up to the ER, and he was running around the ER like he wasn't even sick. I think kids do that sometimes. They can get up to the hospital and they just start acting completely normal.
You know
Um,
what? I tell parents that I think we have something in our front door that like will help kids. So
yeah.
I said, I feel like on the weekends or at night, we should probably just leave the front door open just
Yeah.
to kind of walk through and then to be able to walk back out because something about our front doors seems to cure kids sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, he was having a good old time running around the ER. The nurses even commented like, "Oh, he may not be feeling well, but he seems like he's doing all right. He's having a good time up here." I was making little videos of him. I made lots of little videos of Mason throughout his life. I just thought he was so cute and everything he was doing. So I was making videos of him that night, and we got seen by the doctor. She said he had a double ear infection. Um, we got antibiotics and we were sent on our way. And as we were walking out of the ER, I glanced down at him in a stroller and he was in the middle of a seizure. He was looking kind of up over his shoulder and convulsing and starting to turn purple. This was out of nowhere. He had never had a seizure before.
Hmm.
So I kind of grabbed him, ran back in there, asked him, screaming for help. And they admitted him, kept him for observation. They were like, it's likely a febrile seizure from having a fever. Basically, the seizure they
Hmm.
were saying was triggered by his fever, and they were, explaining that if you're gonna have a seizure, that's the kind they told me this. If he's gonna have one, that's the kind you'd rather he have because it's just related to the fever and not a huge concern. But they did keep him for observation and did some blood work on him, and eventually we were sent home. And they told us to follow up with the pediatrician the next day, which we did. And we were kind of told the same thing. We were given information about febrile seizures and told, I know it's really scary. We'll kind of keep an eye on it just to see if he has any more in the future. But at this point, there wasn't any like treatment or anything that needed to be done for that type of
Hmm.
seizure, which, I know all about this. You're a pediatrician.
Yeah, I mean, usually what we do is try to keep kids from having real high fever. So if they start to have a fever, we just are a little more liberal with giving the ibuprofen or Tylenol or whatnot, just to try to keep it from spiking. Because usually what happens is the seizure tends to happen when the temperature is moving. So it's either at the beginning of the fever when it's on its way up, or after you give medication and it's on its quick descent down. So that's why we
Yes.
try when kids are sick to kind of keep them on around the clock on some meds, just to keep that so it's not going up, down. Because every time you have that change in the temperature, it's a little, that's when the most significant risk is. And of
Yeah.
course, there may be somewhat higher risk to have epilepsy or seizure disorder,
Yes.
but it's not, certainly not the majority. Most of the time, kids have these simple febrile seizures like this, and they will have them throughout their childhood, and then they go away and they never come back. So,
Yes. And that's pretty much the information we were given as well. And I had gone home and kind of researched it too. And, it was a very scary thing to see happen to my son. That,
no question. No question.
we were just going to kind of keep an eye on him and see, which the strange thing about Mason, like you said, it's from the fast increase or decrease in temperature. He only had 101 fever at the hospital, so he didn't even
It wasn't even that.
wasn't even necessarily high of a fever.
No.
So anyways, he recovered from his ear infection, and then we get into January. You know, this happened right before Christmas. So we get into January now. We had his second birthday, and he was going to be starting daycare that week. It was like a big week for him, and he started daycare, loved it, it was great. And then that Friday of the first week he started daycare, he was home with me that day. Just a normal day. I worked from home, and he was running around, playing all day. We have 2 pugs that he absolutely loved, and he's playing with our dogs. And I got off work, we ate dinner. Just want to really point out, it was just a super normal day. There was absolutely nothing there to because I was this overprotective, scared mom constantly, and there was just absolutely nothing there to trigger my concern with him. I got him ready for bed, kissed him goodnight, put him in his crib, and he was fine. He didn't have a temperature. It was just normal. I went back to check on him, and he was starting to fall asleep. I kind of woke him up a little bit when I went in to check on him, and I remember going back out and telling my husband, okay, he's starting to fall asleep. And then I went back in to check on him. It was about an hour. So I figured, he'd fallen asleep. It was about an hour, a little bit more. Whenever I went in, we kept his room pretty dark because he kind of had some sensory issues with going to sleep, and he just had like a little night light. And I just remember shining my light on him and thinking, why is he so still? And there's no way that he's not breathing. And I moved the light to his face and realized that things were horribly, horribly wrong. And everything just kind of started going in slow motion from that point. It was like an out-of-body experience. He was in cardiac arrest, and he had gotten sick and had vomited. And we had to call 911, and they were having us try to do CPR on him. The first responders got there really fast, and I was really happy with that, because when you're trying to work on your own child, and everything is just, I can't even describe to anyone unless you've been there and done it. It just feels so out of body and unreal. And my daughter was there, and I was trying to shield her from seeing what was happening. It was horrific. We had no idea what was going on. I was just in total shock of what was happening. We went up to the hospital. We weren't allowed to go with him immediately because the police had to come, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. This child is suddenly in cardiac arrest. What happened? They were questioning us, and eventually they finally let us go up to the hospital. And there was this moment I'll never forget. We pulled them to the hospital, and when this all started happening, it's like I went into just complete shock. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I could barely even speak. I was just like, what is going on? What is happening? And I sat there in the car with my husband, and I told him I can't go in there. I was like, what if they give us bad news? Because I kind of had thought that worst case scenario, he was unconscious, and they were going to be able to get him on life support, and it may have been a bad outcome in that way, but my mind wasn't letting me go to the place that he was deceased. And I told my husband, I don't think I could go in there. I was like, what if they tell us that he's gone? And my husband kind of said to me, he's like, I'm almost positive he is gone, and you need to kind of prepare yourself for that. He didn't say in those words exactly, but you know what I mean. He kind of had already accepted, just from how our son looked, that he was already gone, and I hadn't. So I was like, they're going to shock him. They're going to bring him back. It's going to be okay. When we got in there, it was the worst case scenario. And they told us they'd been working on him it had been about an hour that they were working on him, and that they weren't able to get his vitals back at all. And then they told us that I needed to make the call for them to stop doing CPR on Mason. And I was like, how can I tell them to stop working on my son? Because that hadn't come to my mind at all, that this was going to be the outcome. I was just in so much, shock at all this.
I know.
So I had to make the call for them to stop working on Mason. And the whole time we were there, like I said, I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I was just standing there in shock and horror, asking what happened. Can someone please tell me what's happening? Because I kept saying he wasn't sick. He was fine. I just put him to bed. There was an hour window of him being normal and fine, and then him being gone. They kept just telling me, you're going to have to wait for the investigation and the autopsy. No one there gave me any details of their findings of any of his, vitals or temperature, anything when he got there. And we later found out on the autopsy, almost 6 months later, that he had a fever when the paramedics got there. They took his temperature and he did have a fever. I guess he had spiked a fever after being put down for bed. So our whole world pretty much changed at that moment.
Yeah.
That's just another surreal feeling when they were like, after we stopped CPR, we had to kind of talk to investigators and the medical examiner. And then they were like, all right, we're sorry for your loss. You guys are free to go home. And we were just like, we're standing there looking at each other like, what has just happened in the span of this hour?
Yeah.
It was just horrific. I can't even put it into adequate words. And we drove home and everything has been different since then. It was just an awful, awful night.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I mean, it's so funny because obviously our circumstances were far different because Andy died in a car accident, but yet, the CPR is the same, right? Having to witness that being done on your own kid, and the utter disbelief is the same of what is happening. What is happening? And for me, it was, my child should not die on the side of the road. And yours is my child should not die in his crib.
exactly.
Right? It's just impossible to wrap your head around. Impossible.
It is absolutely impossible. It's taken me months, if not these past 2 years, to wrap my head around how this happened, how he passed away safe in his crib with me doing everything right. We practiced safe sleep. I was my entire job at work for 8 years focused on child safety. As a social worker, that was what I specialized in, was child safety and keeping the children in our state safe. And my child somehow passed away.
I know.
That was another bad thing because I worked
Yeah,
at
I'm totally with you. I'm a pediatrician.
yeah,
I'm a pediatrician.
yeah, you get it.
I take care of children for a living.
Yeah,
And I could not take care of my own.
yeah,
It really feel like, I mean, I think a lot of us feel like failures as mothers when our kids die, but you have the added thing when this is also your career, is to help care for other people's children, and then you can't. I mean, it was very complicated. I think it made it more complicated, and it would be the same for you exactly.
It adds another layer to the whole thing, and it's really hard to wrap your head around, and the feelings of like doubt and almost like shame in a way that I felt afterwards, and guilt, and it was pretty horrible.
Yeah, it's just something you can't imagine until you live it.
I never thought that anything like this.
And you don't want anyone to imagine it, right?
No, I would never wish this on even my worst enemy. It's like looking back at the type of mom I was like, I could never have imagined anything like this happening to me. And I'm not saying other parents, could, but just I was so cautious about everything. And somehow this still happened. It can literally happen to anyone at any time. And we don't know how long we have with our loved ones. And it's just so important, I think, to really make the most of our time with our children and with our loved ones in general, because we could all go at any moment. And that's what this has pretty much taught me.
Yeah. So I had a couple on, this is a long time ago. Well, two couples. They started the website justendearing.com, and they do different kind of support services and trying to link people together, and they contact me every few months, it seems like, to when they have somebody that calls in or that writes to them who has gone through the death of a child, and they need someone to match. So they like to match people with similar stories. And so they wrote to me just a few weeks ago now with someone who had a 4-year-old who just died in their sleep. And she said, "Do you have anyone?" And like 4 people immediately came to mind. That's how you think that you think about SIDS, and you think about infants dying in their sleep, and that is something we hear all about, and it's so much in your mind as a parent, although you do feel like, I think you have more control than you do, right? Because you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to do safe sleep, I'm going to do this and this and this, and then that makes it totally impossible, which is not true. I mean, you decrease the risks as much as you can, but you can't eliminate them. But you think once your kids get a certain age, that isn't going to happen. You're not going to put your child to bed and not wake up in the morning.
Exactly.
And yet it does happen. And it's terrifying, and it's something I would never want to like just go announcing though to my patients in the office, because then now you live in a terrified way, and I don't want that. I mean, I don't want a mom waking up, and checking on their child every hour, because as you know, it doesn't even help.
Exactly. I was the mom who
checked on Mason.
Exactly.
And he was fine, and you checked on him an hour later, and he was gone.
Exactly.
So all of that can't even prevent it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's just so tragic about the whole thing. And I don't know. It's
is
so hard. I mean, it's hard as a parent to live. It's hard as in any way.
There's been times where I've like started to, I think all lost parents at some point or another look at the circumstances of their child's death and start doing the what if game. And what if I had gone in and checked on him a little bit sooner? What if I had let him stay up a little bit later that night? And I think that can get really, for me anyways, it can get really toxic. And I try not to allow myself to do that because, like you said, things happen so quickly. And if I try to put this guilt on myself, it's going to just eat me alive, and I'm not going to be able to keep moving forward in my journey. So I really try to accept that this has happened. And
well, as much as you can, right?
Yeah.
As much as you can, because you're right. What comes in? This what if?
Exactly.
We all do it. Every single parent I have talked to has done the what if game. Everyone, no matter what the circumstances of their child's death, they do it. I do it. You do it. We all do to an extent. But it is something that you have to hopefully try to get through, because if you live with that continuously, it does, like you had said, it just eats at you.
It does.
And then it makes it really impossible to do any healing if all you're doing every single day is think about the things you might have done and how you might have made it different.
Exactly. So I ended up right when he passed, and we didn't have any answers yet on how or why he had passed. I had looked into sudden deaths of, a toddler, and found the SUDC Foundation, which is Sudden Unexplained Death in Childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And we joined the foundation, and they have just been a huge, huge support to our family. They, being connected with these other families who experienced a loss in the same way, in the same circumstances. A lot of them are maybe slightly different, but in the end, a lot of us lost a healthy child over the age of 1 in their sleep, with no explanation. Ours was a little bit different because we technically got a cause of death from the medical examiner. Mason's official cause of death was complications of a presumed febrile seizure, with a common virus as a contributing factor.
Mm-hmm. But yet there's another diagnosis that's sudden unexplained death and epilepsy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Too. That, you can just like die in your sleep when you have epilepsy. And that's something that happens too, that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
That people just don't talk about because it's terrifying.
Yeah,
to
it
think
is.
About. And in his case, there was no reason to think that he had epilepsy, really. He had a history of one febrile seizure. So, you're right in that you live in a world where it could be either one, sort of, but in some ways it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't at the end of the day.
Because the outcome is exactly the same.
It is. You're right.
And there's nothing in either case that you could have done. I remember I've read different things on sudden unexplained death and epilepsy, and there's literally nothing you could do. If you would have walked in the room 5 minutes after his heart stopped, wouldn't have mattered. You wouldn't have been able to get it going again, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is. it makes me feel a little bit. I've heard so many other stories from other families since I started sharing about Mason, and in a way, it brought me a little bit of comfort that because I was always like I was just too late. I was just barely too late to save him. It was an hour window of time, but I've heard within minutes it can
Yeah.
be too late, and they're not able to. Even the husband was a first responder and started CPR immediately. All these different scenarios, and it's just sometimes it just you can't bring them back, and
Yeah.
kind of helped me feel a little bit better about the situation. I do believe that Mason was getting a virus and had a seizure, but it was kind of like a best. His Mason's autopsy was very normal. Everything looked. He was a normal, healthy little kid, and that was heartbreaking to see. And the medical examiner kind of gave us the best hypothesis on what they think happened to Mason that night. And like you said, whether he eventually had epilepsy one day or not, or if it was just a common
Okay.
febrile seizure, it doesn't really matter in the outcome. It was the same. And he passed away. And I started posting Mason's story on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I was a little conflicted in doing so because I understand that thousands of children are going to have these kinds of seizures and they will not have the same outcome as Mason. So I didn't want to
Yeah.
scare people.
Yeah. Fear mongering kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. A lot of people, or not a lot, some people kind of accused me of that when I started sharing Mason's story. And I'm like, that's not my intent at all. I'm just sharing what happened to my son. And these are the answers I got from the autopsy and the medical examiner. This is what happened to my son. I don't know if I could have changed anything or done anything different. Of course, looking back now, I wish I would have had video monitors, this, that, and the other. But I didn't. He was a healthy 2-year-old child, and he wasn't sick.
Yeah. But to be honest, Lindsay, I don't think it would have done a bit of difference if you had all the monitors in the world.
Yeah.
I really, really don't. I mean, I have talked to a family that the mom was a medical professional herself. They were on an airplane. The child died sitting in the husband's lap,
Oh my goodness.
sitting on her dad's lap
Yeah.
on an airplane. She just died. They did, obviously, they noticed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
They did CPR right away. Nothing. You can't
Yeah.
bring them back from. There are certain things you just can't. So all the monitors in the world
Yeah.
aren't that helpful.
Yeah. That's the what if game I play in my head sometimes. What if I had him on? Like I said, I know it's not good for me to go down that route because in the end it doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
This happened.
I mean, it's one of those things that I have families. I've got families that had children die. I mean, I've got one that had a child die of SIDS, and then they came to me, of course, because I've had a child die, and then and I mean, you know what? If you're in the Grand Rapids area and you had a child die and now you have other kids, you should see me as your pediatrician because honestly, and other people don't understand, and I do understand. And we do. Do we have more monitors on those kids than other kids? Yeah. Because it can make the parents feel a little bit better. And if it can make you feel better, okay, that is 100% worth it if it's going to make you feel better. Do I think as a medical professional, do I think it will actually really help any sort of medical complication or outcome? No. But what it does is it gives parents a little more comfort, like I can go to sleep. Because if you can't go to sleep otherwise, then let's get the monitor. Let's get the monitor so you can go to sleep. Even if there's not a lot of science behind the monitor, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You do what you need to do.
Exactly. Because the PTSD after losing a child in their sleep is crazy. That was something I struggled with horribly, was constantly checking my husband, my teenager, our dogs, everyone to make sure they were still breathing when they slept. I couldn't sleep for a long time. And then I went on and had a rainbow baby girl, and it was absolutely terrifying. She was a newborn, and I was constantly watching her breathe because I had seen the worst of the worst happen, and I'd gone in to do a check where you see if your baby's still breathing and found mine wasn't. So in my head, my PTSD and my grief was just constantly there. You need to go check. You need to go check. So I have found monitors very useful for me in terms of my coping.
Yeah.
With my rainbow baby. But like you said, a lot of it's for peace of mind for the parent. And so I can sleep at night because I don't know if I could sleep with my youngest right now without a monitor on. So,
Well, and I think that happens. I mean, in general, even I didn't have a child die from that, but still, I look a little closer, right? I look at my husband and put a hand on him to make sure he's breathing. There's just things, you just have those fears all the time. And of course, for me, it's obviously my worst fears are in the car, right? In the car,
yeah.
it's always like, just drove back from Florida and my poor son was driving. And every time like a semi's up on our side or something happens a little bit startling and I jump.
Yeah.
And he's like, Mom, you drive me crazy when you're jumping all the time. I mean, I didn't say to him, I didn't used to do this before your brother died. Yeah. But honestly, I didn't used to do this before his brother died. But now I do, right? Those
little triggers.
I don't even remember the car accident. I don't remember anything about that car accident. But if something comes up in traffic, I'm like thinking, this is it, right?
Yeah.
This is happening again. So it makes 100% sense that you would do that with other kids, with anyone, honestly, your husband, everybody, because you've had it, you've lived it, you know it. I mean, it's hard when that's what your experience is, even if that's not what happens 99.99% of the time. And you know that in your head, you know that that's not logical, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's logical or not. What matters is what you're feeling.
Yeah, I kind of struggled with those PTSD related. A lot of people ask, how do you move beyond that in the early days? How do you cope with the grief, And I tried therapy in the early days. I tried 2 different therapists, and it was almost like my brain hadn't processed what had happened enough to really talk it out with someone and process it at that point. It was just too soon. I was still so numb and unable to really I just couldn't process it at all. And so I didn't really find therapy that helpful for me. I've considered possibly looking into I think it's EMDR. For PTSD, because I get really physically triggered when I hear sirens. Like just a minute ago, the siren just went by. Like it triggers my heart starts racing, and I always think it's got to be related to one of my loved ones, and I'm like, that's not realistic.
I tell you, it's very hard, but so incredibly helpul.
Have you tried that?
Oh, I've done EMDR. Yes.
Oh yeah.
I've done EMDR, and I go to the therapist and I think we should do some EMDR today. And I would try to come up with every excuse and talk to about everything I possibly could to not do the EMDR, because the EMDR itself, not fun to do, but I mean, has helped me so much.
I've heard that people say it's incredibly, incredibly helpful with PTSD. I may look into that one day.
Yeah, because like you with the sirens, it was such a terrible activating thing for me. Mm-hmm. And what's really funny is I don't remember hearing sirens.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, when I kind of regained consciousness and knew what was going on again, there were, I think I've heard count that there were probably 5 or 6 ambulances and 4 fire trucks. I mean, it was a horrific accident. There was police everywhere, right? I mean, the whole freeway was, and so they were everywhere. So there were lots of sirens, obviously, coming. I remember hearing none of them. But yet, if I hear one, immediately, the heart rate goes, the anxiety spiked. I mean, not anymore because I did the EMDR, but for, a long time afterwards, all of those things would come up every single time I heard something like that. So it's unbelievably helpful.
Yeah, I may have to look into that. I need to give it another shot. We're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Mason's passing, and I'm like, I kind of feel like I've kind of been stuck in this functional freeze state for the past 2 years, just trying to kind of survive, and I've kind of processed a little bit better what all's happened and come to terms with it a little bit. And I need to kind of get out there and do a little bit more work on myself, I think, and get back into therapy, try it again, because I do like the idea of talking to someone one-on-one about it. I like talking to I've been using TikTok as my therapy. We'll say that.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Actually, I was going to say that out loud to you because, talked about not doing therapy. I'm like, yeah, you do. You
Yeah.
do. You
In
do
a
it.
way.
You do it in a very different way. I mean, just like for me, this podcast, it's also therapy. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a therapist that I see, not as much anymore, but this is therapy. This is doing my grief work. I mean, when I have talked to Gwen. Obviously, Gwen comes on every about 6 weeks or so and is on the podcast. And we talk about grief work a lot. And I have learned from her that grief work can look very, very different.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember that first story of her going and seeing somebody in the couple, and the husband's out chopping wood and has the biggest pile of wood by the side of the house that she's ever seen. And she turned to the wife and said, "That's a big pile of grief out there." Because that was his grief work. TikTok is your grief work. The podcast is my grief work. I mean,
Yeah.
different people have such different things.
They do.
Yeah, whether it's going to a support group or doing actual therapy or having other things in your life that serve as like a little purpose for your grief, a little outlet for your grief.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Yeah, it is. And I've noticed, when Mason passed, I felt this need to connect with other lost moms. It was like I didn't feel like I had anyone in my life, my actual, day-to-day interaction with people who understood what I was going through or feeling. And I was like, I have to connect with other people who have been here, done this, who are further in their journey than I am. I need to connect with them and see how they're doing this. And I joined every single grief group I could find. And then just started kind of posting on TikTok here and there about, I started out just posting some photos, and people were just like, oh my God, he's so beautiful. I'm so sorry. And I liked that Mason was being appreciated, and noticing that strangers were, showing love to me and compassion, and it was healing for me. And so I just I didn't know anything about TikTok. I wasn't a social media person at all, really. I had a Facebook, but I just kind of started here and there posting a little bit about Mason, and people wanted to know what happened, of course. And it just kind of grew from there. And it's been huge in my, journey and moving forward, being able to share about my son and feel all the love from the people who follow me, and, all the kind comments I get. I used to just sit there and read comments and cry, and, just process how I was just so happy that people saw my son and he was here. He was, he existed, and he was so special and important to me. And it really touched me that people all around the world were seeing him and, interested in my life and wanted to support me even virtually, because I felt like I had a pretty small support group at home. And then I had this new huge support group of people all over the world. And I had all these messages trickling in from moms who had lost a child in similar circumstances. And that connection with other lost moms was super important to me and my journey and moving forward. And I hope by sharing Mason's story that they'll see me and see me moving forward, and maybe it'll help another lost mom in some way. And I've had people reach out to me and tell me, thank you. I feel a connection with you. I lost my child in XYZ way. And, I appreciate you sharing about your son. And, it's great. I love having TikTok. They're talking about getting rid of TikTok, and I'm scared because I don't have a backup plan, but I'll find a way to keep talking about Mason and telling his story and connecting with other moms, because I need that in my journey. So,
Well, it's hard when our kids are, relatively young. Obviously, mine was way older because mine was 14, but their world is pretty small, and they don't know a lot of people, and they haven't met a lot of people. And it breaks your heart as a mom to know they're never going to know anybody new, and no one else is ever going to know them and know about what an awesome, amazing person they were and a kid they were. And you posting on TikTok is making him, so many more people know him. And it's just made his world so much bigger and his impact so much bigger. I mean, I remember interviewing a dad one time. I'm going to almost cry when I say this, but he said to me, "I feel like I know Andy through you and through hearing you." And I was like, yeah, and that's what I want. Yeah. I mean, this is some, guy in Tennessee, and he tells me he knows my son. I mean, that's beautiful, right? And you with TikTok and talking about Mason and showing Mason's videos and all this stuff, people know Mason.
yeah.
they know his smile, they know his laugh, his giggle, his all of that. They know him. I mean, I feel like in just the few that I watched, I like know a little bit of him. And that's, I mean, it's just such a gift to give to this parent, because what's our biggest fear then? As I mean, for that child, obviously our biggest fear, I think, really can be that this is going to happen again, right? That it's going to happen to something else. But the biggest fear for that particular child is that they're going to be forgotten. That
Exactly.
someday the only person that was going to remember is Andy is me. And the only person who will ever remember Mason is you. And maybe, you know, obviously dad and
Yeah.
sister, but like that's it. Nobody else is going to remember. And when we do some things like this, and even when other people come and share on the podcast, like we just made it so hundreds or thousands more people know our kids,
Yeah. Exactly. I love that.
and they can see them, and it's like forever there on the internet, and they can have new people meet them every single day.
Yes. That's, I think, as I've heard just from so many lost moms of not wanting our child to be forgotten and hearing other people say your child's name after they pass. Because
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes people are a little bit afraid to bring up your child around you when they pass. They don't want to trigger you or make you start crying. But it's
No
like, no,
question.
I want to talk about Mason. I want to be able to tell stories about him when people are talking about their kids without making people feel uncomfortable. Like, he was my pride and joy. This is my beautiful son. I want to be able to talk about him. I want people to know him. Like, we isolated a lot during COVID, and I think there was a lot of people, even in my family and in my husband's family, have had to kind of deal with the grief of not having a super close relationship with Mason because we were just always at home. We didn't go anywhere a lot. Of course, they had met him, but they didn't have. It was a hard time during COVID, and we were at home a lot, and so that's been something that I feel like some people in my family have kind of had to wrap their head around, maybe grieve that, the relationship they had with them and wishing that they had maybe had a little bit more. So I just share as much as I can about him. I want to talk about him all the time. Another thing that kind of segue into this, sorry, it's really important to me, I want to share, is that because of Mason passing, my husband's side of the family has made it a point monthly to get everyone together in Mason's memory. We call them family gatherings. We all get together, we share a meal, we play games. It's a huge group, and we've done it monthly for 2 years. And it's been super, super helpful for me I used to look forward to that every month, is getting to get out of the house when I was in the depths of grieving those first few months. It's like, I can get out of the house, we're going to go play some games, be around family, nothing threatening. It's just laid back vibes, and it has been super helpful for me. And
Oh my word, yes.
I loved that. So it's brought my husband's side of the family extremely close, and we now have celebrated like births, birthdays, graduations, people getting licensed. It's like this huge group that's meeting every month, and it's been so great. I absolutely love that this has come from this horrible, situation of my son passing away, but it really has brought my husband's side of the family so much closer.
I love that. That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it's not always the case, because some families, they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say, and so then they just don't say
Mm-hmm.
anything or do anything. Your family intentionally decided to come together once a month, even though it may be hard, and even though it may be lots of tears, and you laugh, you cry, you do everything, right? You
Yeah.
play games, you just appreciate being together and appreciate each other and not be afraid of you.
Yeah.
I feel like so many people are afraid of us. I don't know. It's like, child loss is somehow catchy and contagious.
Oh,
Like if
yeah.
they get too close to us, maybe the same thing's going to happen. Or I don't really want to be around them because I don't want to think about this happening to me, because this would be
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. I always felt like a burden, like they didn't want to be around me because I make sad, or,
Yeah.
I would have, which no one ever told me I was a burden. It was just my own, negative thoughts. But
Right. I think
I
we
think,
put it on ourselves more than other people actually feel it. But we do put it on ourselves. Because what I think is, I wouldn't want to be around me.
yeah.
Why would they want to be around me? They don't want to be around me. I don't even want to be around me. I don't even
Yeah.
like how I am right now. So how would other people love this? But the fact that, your husband's family was like, no, we're intentionally doing this. This is not like a negotiable thing. We're just doing this.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah. It's been great. It was, especially in those early days when I barely wanted to leave the house or do anything, like just knowing, okay, you're going to get ready this one day for the month and go be around people who love you and want to support you. And we're going
And
to
if you
make this
cry
a
the whole time, it's
priority.
okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And it's great. I absolutely love it. And like I said, some of us have had babies since then, and we're getting to watch these little ones grow up now. And it is bittersweet because I'm like, man, I wish we had this when Mason was here. He would have loved to have been here with his cousins and playing in the little groups of kids, because he would have been 4 now. So that part of it is hard, but I still am very appreciative that they've made this a priority. We did like a huge family group photo just recently, and in the center of the photo, we had a framed picture of Mason. So it was the whole side of my husband's family, and then we were holding a photo of Mason, and it was just really special.
Oh, I'm glad they did that.
Yeah.
Photos, I think, can be really hard.
Yeah. We had never, that's one thing I try to tell people is if you don't do family photos, do them, because I always hated my weight and how I looked, and I always said I will not do family photos ever. So when Mason passed away, I realized I had no family photos of myself, my husband, Mason, and my daughter. Like I had nothing, and it broke my heart. So like I finally made it a point to do these family photos, and even though Mason's only in them in the photograph with us, it's important to do pictures. Don't let your insecurities prevent you from, getting photos done.
Yeah.
Because one day that could be what you have to look back on. And I always regret that I don't have a good picture of all of us together from that time. So get the photos done.
Yeah. Any other words of advice you have for people?
Man, grief is so unique with everyone, and how everybody gets through it
Mm-hmm.
is just so unique and different. Just, lean on your support systems. Take it a day at a time, a minute at a time if you need to. Spend time with your loved ones. Take photos, videos, all that. And if you're dealing with child loss and grief, just know there's a big, huge support group of other lost moms out there. And if you
Yeah.
find them in these groups or on social media, or they're out there and they want to connect and they want to be there for you. I've made some like extremely, extremely close friends who we can share the good, the bad, the ugly, some of those things that may not be, great to say in front of just random people. We understand each other, and we've been there. And so use your support systems, other lost moms, or not moms, moms and dads. Fathers are grieving too. I know they grieve kind of differently sometimes than moms, but for me, connecting with others has just been huge. So I don't really know of any other advice. I'm still trying to figure this out every day
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
get through it. So
Well, and you are right. Those other bereaved parents can be so precious to you. I mean, it's funny because I have had, other crises and bad things happen to some of my very, very closest friends. In, and then I'm talking about them to like people at work, like, oh, my really good friend, whatever. And then like, oh no, they, live in Tennessee or Utah or Texas or Toronto or all of these places are St. Louis. I mean, I'm just coming up with all these places where I have good friends. I mean, people that I consider some of my very closest friends. And, I talk to people and I think that it's probably kind of weird to them because, a lot of these people I've met in person maybe once or twice, but still, in my heart of hearts, they're like my people, right? You get like, they're my people.
yeah.
The people at work, and I mean, they're still great and wonderful, but they're not like my people now. We've just experienced something and have this shared the shared experience that other people just don't have. And it just brings you together in a way that other people just can't understand.
You're exactly right. Some of my closest friends that are other lost moms, they live in different states, and we haven't met yet, but hopefully one day, because they've really been there to support me through this, and I really appreciate each of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want you to remind people again, because we talked about this at the very beginning, on how people can follow you on TikTok. So you say that again to everybody, and then I'll make sure to put that too in the write-up that'll go on the website and on social media.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Thank you. My TikTok is Lynn's with a red heart, and then it's Mason's Mama after that. So Lynn's Mason's Mama on TikTok. That's my username.
And I just want to mention that Mason's Mama, because that's another thing that draws me to you, because obviously, what do I go by on the podcast as? Marcy, Andy's mom.
Yeah, Andy's mom.
I am Andy's mom, and you are Mason's mama. And I just love that. This is the one time where we can still be that mom and that mama. And
Yes.
we can't do that otherwise, right? So
Exactly.
it's just such a gift. So I love that. I love that you did that. I love that you're Mason's mama.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you letting me come on here and tell the story of Mason. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.